Julia and Cassio were a newlywed couple. They were blissfully enjoying their honeymoon. They were on a cliff and trying out wingsuit flying. However, their joy turned to disaster when Cassio had a serious accident that left him paralyzed. Nevertheless, Julia patiently and faithfully cared for Cassio, hoping he would recover as before. They then went to Julia's mother's house. There, Cassio underwent therapy with the assistance of a young woman named Messias. Along with Messias, there was also Lucas, a man who worked as a gardener and helped care for Cassio. Since the accident, Cassio felt he was no longer a perfect husband. He thought that the person he was now would not be able to be what Julia wanted, including intimacy. Therefore, Cassio asked that they start sleeping separately. He chose to focus on continuing his work as a writer and needed a quiet atmosphere. This decision was clearly difficult for Julia, and although she seemed sad, she accepted it for her husband's sake. As the days passed, Julia grew increasingly lonely, with no one to talk to and share her stories with. The only person who often accompanied her to talk was Lucas, the gardener, until one day Cassio made a shocking statement. He might not be able to be intimate with Julia, so he allowed her to be intimate with other men as long as she didn't use her feelings. Julia couldn't accept this and was very upset with Cassio. How could he have such a ridiculous idea? Sometime later, Julia's friend, Bianca, came to visit. Julia told Bianca about Cassio's ridiculous idea. Bianca said it was fine as long as Julia could control her emotions. Sometime later, when Bianca met Cassio, Julia accidentally belittled Cassio in front of Bianca. A commotion ensued. An angry Cassio even hit Julia. An upset Julia then went to Bianca, but something strange happened there. They became intimate. The next day, Bianca had to go home, leaving Julia. Naturally, Julia felt lonely again. In this situation, Julia recalled Cassio's ridiculous idea. It turned out that not only Bianca agreed, Messias also agreed. The problem was who Julia would do this with. She soon remembered Lucas, the gardener there. Maybe she could make out with him, just for fun. Julia began to approach Lucas, and there she also saw Lucas's talent for music. Julia often saw Lucas every day, and one day, Julia boldly asked Lucas to make out for the first time. Julia had asked Lucas to forget about the incident, but the bond between them had already formed. They often met and made out wherever they were, even in the garden. Since being close to Lucas, Julia seemed much more cheerful and happy. Messias had witnessed Julia and Lucas making out, but he remained silent and didn't report the incident to Cassio. It turned out that Julia wasn't the only one who wanted to be intimate with Lucas. Julia's mother also secretly wanted to be intimate with Lucas. That day, Julia's mother was making out alone while watching Lucas tending the plants. Lucas and Julia's relationship was getting out of control. It seemed like they were both in love and couldn't let go of each other. In fact, they were making out almost every day, as if they never got bored. Several months passed, and Cassio continued undergoing therapy with Messias. There was some progress. He was starting to be able to move his lower body, although still limited. Simultaneously, Cassio wanted to try being intimate again. The problem this time wasn't with Julia, but with Messias. For months, Cassio had felt comfortable with him, until finally, Messias revealed the truth about Julia and Lucas's relationship. Upon hearing this, Cassio was filled with anger and disappointment. He called Julia and demanded an explanation. What Julia had done had indeed crossed the line, but Cassio realized that it all started with his own decision. The idea he thought was a solution had actually destroyed his marriage. Now, Julia has truly fallen in love with Lucas. She chooses to go with him because she is pregnant. Cassio can't do anything about it due to her current condition. They decide to part ways amicably. Perhaps this is what's best for all of them. And finally, the film ends.